name is Dr. Sibanda. Welcome to African Voices. Today we're going to have a look at Sudan in the broader context of African politics. And today with me is Tchiyiwe, who you know very well. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Look, we've talked about a number of African countries and situations there, and there are a few hot spots as we begin the new year. I've seen a report about hot spots in the world, and that we have to watch out for in 2019. And Sudan fares quite at the top of that list as one of those countries that the world has got to watch out for as a serious hotspot in the coming year. There are currently protests in which a lot of things have been happening. People are dying, journalists being threatened with death, and you have a president who's unwilling to consider the country's interest in terms of his own leadership. Let me see what you think about Sudan in general as within the context of dictatorship and on the African continent, and what example it produces for the African continent.
Thanks for asking, Nkululeko. Sudan, I think, is another example of the chronic condition that we have of I want to be president forever and ever. And that's what Omar al-Bashir represents for me as far as Sudan. I think he's been in power for just about 30 years plus, and he refuses to leave. Again, uses military, him being the president, he's misusing the military against the citizens. And I think it's time. I think this time, do you remember a few years ago we had the Arab Spring that just swept over the northern parts of Africa? I feel like what has happened in Sudan in the last few weeks since about Christmas time, I believe, was an action by citizens in general, a bit like we were talking about trade unions, etc., before organizing themselves with the citizens. In this particular case with Sudan, this current situation has actually been triggered by what's called the Sudanese Professional Association. So it's different professionals that have come together, and they're the ones that have asked for Omar al-Bashir to go finally, and on the basis of economic mismanagement. People are starving in a country that's oil-rich like Sudan. If you remember very well, Sudan was when it was still Sudan with South Sudan combined. Sudan was actually one of the biggest oil producers across the world, and that is no longer benefiting the people at the grassroots. And so the professionals have come together and said, no, we don't want you here.
Let's talk a little bit about the political leadership of the country and what role I think. Look, I think that the African continent, and I've seen this in Europe, where the Western Europe has said to some of the countries that wanted to join the bloc, look, you've got to meet some specific primary conditions for you to be accepted into this group of nations as a member, simply because that enhances development and gives the people of the continent a better life. I mean, do you think that? I mean, I don't know what you think about the role that the African Union, for example, could play in encouraging Sudan to move over. Look, you had the same situation with Mugabe in Zimbabwe, where he'd been on for a very long time, and when a military coup was carried out against him, some people thought that the reason the African Union or even SADC didn't act against the unlawful act of a military coup was that, look, they thought that, look, he should go. He's been there for a very long time. Do you think there are any attitudes towards, or should there be such attitudes towards the Sudanese president?
There should be. And I think the African Union in itself, because that's who you've pointed out, I'm sure there are quite a lot of other blocs across the continent, but with the African Union itself, it has been seen to be weak in several cases as far as situations like that are concerned. We have to remember, though, the African Union is not a being, a person. it is a union of different countries, different personalities. And I'm sure that the dynamics within that, the power dynamics, tend to influence the direction that the African Union takes. But I think usually I find the African Union to be a sitting duck in most cases. But interesting enough, and whilst this is good, it's also a bit disappointing that it's not coming from the local actors specifically, but international organizations like Amnesty International have come out in strong condemnation of al-Bashir, especially in this recent move where following protests, what happened was the government actually sent security personnel in the form of the military itself to go and attack the protesters. And when they ran away and sought help, medical help in the hospitals. What the military did was that they actually went in and tear gassed patients and hospitals. You know, that's a total violation of international law. So Amnesty International has come in to condemn that, but the African Union has been somewhat mute on things like that, and that really concerns me because that's a total violation of the most basic unit of safety that people could run for.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. I mean, and the idea that the African Union is not an individual, in fact, it is a union and there are dynamics within. I buy that. But look, so is the European Union. But the European Union has been able to specifically develop grounds upon which one could be a member, certain values that cannot be sacrificed for any basis, and that those values, in fact, may be the ones that underwrite our attitudes and our behaviors, but also underwrite our own development. And you put it right. Sudan has a lot of oil, and oil is a commodity that will sell at any time, anywhere. So you can't have a period where Sudan doesn't have business, Sudan doesn't have foreign currency. This very protest started off in some sense as protests that have been brewing around the price of bread and so forth. And one wonders why Sudan would have any problems with commodities, when in fact Sudan has a lot of will have a lot of foreign currency anyway, because you sell oil to the world and you sell
Absolutely.
it on the US dollar. So is it then that these, and that would be my argument, that the problem we have in Sudan, in my view, would be that of a strong man, and that usually strong men end up being surrounded by pillars who are also their own strong men, and that you start off by supporting this strong man at the top and end up also supporting those that support the strong men at the top.
So
and that's very costly.
Yeah, this again comes back to the concept of those in power using state resources to better themselves and those around them, unfortunately. When it comes to the African Union as a bloc, so let me not be too harsh, because I think there are so many things about the African Union that are progressive and that are good and that they can be praised for.
Really?
But yes, I think when it comes to certain things, yes, I would commend them. I was going to cite something, but I think I've just lost that, so I'll go back to it. Right. But so the problem, I think, is on paper, it's all there. Okay, we adhere to this, we accept this, we adhere. But when it comes to implementation and actually saying you as a country have failed to adhere to this particular expectation, or what you've signed up for, what you've ratified as a country with in the African Union Agreement, we do not actually take action. There's this, I don't know where it comes from, but we tend to do this brotherly thing, sisterly thing, where you just say, hey, don't do that again, as opposed to, look, you've done this, you're being penalized in that way. And so countries become complacent, and everybody follows suit. I think that's what happens. Whereas in the West, yes, you will feel the pinch, because you will be penalized and your country will feel it. And the people at the grassroots will speak up, because it's not just the person at the top who is holding this power, but people are listened to, and you don't want that kind of scandal. Whereas it's difficult to actually scandalize the party in government somehow. From my Southern African experience, I won't speak for the entire Southern Africa, East Africa, at least what I know, and a bit of West Africa. I know it's difficult to scandalize the party in power to a point where they say, we have really failed the people.
Well, look, I want to pick up on, and I think it's important on one of the things you said, which is that you know, the African Union. You think it has got some good points now. I think we should talk about that, because there's a particular question relating to Sudan and al-Bashir specifically, where I remember a few years ago he had to attend an event in Europe, and you know, there was an attempt even to get him to The Hague. A lot of problems with the international community in terms of the human rights record, and the African Union, which I think should play a very huge part, especially in these countries where you've had a long-standing leader who doesn't want to go.
And who kills his people.
And who kills his people.
Yeah.
I think the African Union should take a stand, which is why I invoke it very seriously on Sudan, Cameroon, and so forth. I think it should be operational there. And that, you know, at that time, the African Union came in and said, no, you cannot try the Sudanese president. You should not ask him any questions, because the African Union doesn't have faith in the processes at the Hague and so forth. Yeah. But look, and you make a good use of the concept of brother-sister thing, which I think is an informality. It's being abused. It's an informality that takes away the formality of process and procedure. So you do certain things in a particular way, and Africa has to get to that stage where you understand that if somebody doesn't do things the way we've agreed they should be done beforehand, then they have flouted the rules and they should be punished for that.
Absolutely.
And held to account. Now you have these African leaders that continuously flout their own regulations. And as it refers to Sudan, don't you think it was a mistake? Should we say it was a mistake for the African Union not to take an opportunity to get rid of al-Bashir?
I'm thinking, I'm going to try and go back in memory. I'm thinking this was some summit that was held in South Africa, where al-Bashir went, and President Jacob Zuma of South Africa. Well, because we have a treaty. I think they have a treaty where he could have been
International Criminal Court.
Yes, where but they requested for him not to go back to Sudan, but instead to be sent to The Hague to face justice. Is that the context in which you're coming from? Yeah. Okay, so I totally agree with you that we shouldn't be that protective. I wonder why we actually don't have a system in place within the continent that could carry out could try these criminal cases.
Well, it's simply because we don't want to hold them to account.
The reason I say that is because the side of the argument that sort of protects people from going to the International Criminal Court now at The Hague is because everyone who has been tried there is an African leader, and there's so many countries across the world that are party to the International Criminal Court system. That's the only reason why I think people are becoming skeptical. Africans are sort of saying, hey, it's not just us. There are people with war crimes across in Iraq. You know, there are countries amongst themselves. Of course, America is no longer party to the International Criminal Court. But there are other countries that are doing so many things, committing so many atrocities in their own countries as well as outside of their countries that have never been tasked. And that's the only reason why African leaders are saying, hey, look, why is it just us?
I am sympathetic to an argument where you feel that what is supposed to be a justice system is discriminatory. But come on.
But I'm not saying
are we going to say,
but I'm saying why?
Yeah, but let's demystify the argument. I think that the argument is to a certain extent oversimplifying. Because look,
of course,
I've heard people say, well, Bush should go to The Hague for his crimes in Iraq. No, it's not the same. Bush was in Iraq for all the wrong reasons, if you want to say that. And I'm one of those people who is and was against the Iraqi war before it started, when it was going on, and after it is finished. I still don't think it was justified at all.
Blair's role as well is put into question. We ourselves here, Blair's role is put into question.
Exactly.
And he's not answerable to anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
It's when nobody else is answerable for those crimes. And you can't justify war crimes in any way.
No, look.
But people should be held to account when people's lives have been lost. And I agree, African leaders should be held to account. But I'm saying the reason that they forward for not honoring cause such as that one, to say we're summoning you to the Hague.
Let's demystify that. Let's demystify that, because look, whatever crimes Bush and Blair committed by going into that war, they're fundamentally different.
Absolutely.
From a president who sits at State House and says, those protesters, go and shoot them. You're talking about people who are actually at war. They have declared a war. If an African president declares a war and is actually at war, and there are soldiers who go rogue here and there and kill people.
Charles Taylor of what's it? Is it Bylos? Charles Taylor was Sierra Leone, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he has had his he has been tried in at the Hague. So it's not like it's not happening. It is happening. It is definitely happening, and I think there should be a system like that. Pardon?
He's in Wakefield.
He's in Wakefield, isn't it?
Charles Taylor, he's in Wakefield.
Oh, right. I knew his wife was. I didn't know that he was.
Oh, well, maybe that's why she was there. But yeah, he's in a prison in Wakefield.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So, but
he's in Wakefield with still because he's in a jailed by the
he's jailed. Oh, I see. But I know his wife lives here.
No, he's in jail. He's in prison. But look, I agree with that, because she's now vice president or something like that.
Oh, she's back home. Yeah,
she's back home. Yeah. But look, the idea is that, for me, if you have a person who commits crimes, I mean, take, for example, what's happening in Sudan right now. He's sitting there, and he's having his own soldiers attack and kill people. There is no. I've never believed that there is ever a need to kill people.
No.
Look, you've got sophisticated technology. You've got tear gas. You have your water cannons. There is no way you will be unable to manage crowds in this century without killing people. You can certainly do that. The only circumstances in which people die genuinely in a public demonstration, I think, is when they run and trample on each other or something like this. Those are genuine accidents. But you can't have an accident in which
your own government.
There are no circumstances in which a gunshot
shouldn't be acceptable.
should kill anybody in a demonstration. No,
absolutely not.
Not in this century. And when that happens, that leader, I don't care who tries them. If somebody from the United States with a much bigger gun, because the only reason al-Bashir is killing people is because he's got a bigger gun than the people on the streets.
People on the streets, and nobody's holding him to account.
Nobody has a bigger gun than him in the country.
But the thing is, the people he is actually killing are the people who, for once, are standing up. You know, I like it when a revolution comes from the people, when people revolt, and it's coming from the people. You know. I do not see al-Bashir going further than this yet. If I'm really Omar al-Bashir should.
Well, if it does
he's got no leg to stand on within his own political party. He's being opposed. So it's nice when it comes from the people themselves. They oppose you and they challenge you, because often I think we become the problem when we don't challenge the things. We just become sitting.
That gets me back to our question then, which originally is that should the African Union, given the length, because it becomes harder to deal with the leader when he stayed for a long time, should the African Union then be encouraged by a new generation to look at the question of dictatorships on the continent much differently? And my proposal here is that for people like al-Bashir, who kills their people, for people like Emerson Mnangagwa in Zimbabwe, for people like the Cameroonian president, who have ordered their own people to be killed by live ammunition, at some point, we should stop worrying about whether it's the Americans that pick them up and put them in prison or the French. Anybody. Right now, the only advantage that al-Bashir has over his people is the bigger guns, the monopoly on violence. So if he enjoys monopoly on violence, somebody else with a monopoly on violence over and above his own must be able to arrest him and put him wherever he puts them. We shouldn't care. So that we set an example that we're not going to defend a silly principle that says, oh yeah, we feel that the colonialists are coming back and they're coming back through the back door and they're taking our dictators away. Our dictators
no,
must go.
our dictators should go.
They should
our
go.
dictators should go. They should definitely go. But we should not create another Muammar Gaddafi situation where, because the outside say, and they come and kill, and then you just need. I mean,
Chihana, Africa brought that upon itself. I disagree with every grain in my body in the manner in which Muammar Gaddafi was removed.
Yeah.
But we would not have that situation if Muammar Gaddafi had served 2 terms and left.
Yeah, absolutely. But should it have ended like that? It should have come from the people.
Well, he never gave the people the opportunity to let it come from them.
But that's the answer to the question of what should the African Union be doing. You know what? We, the people, should be rising and saying you're not fit for purpose when it comes to the context of these leaders that are doing this. Let us do that.
Chihana, the 6 people dead in Zimbabwe yesterday who are rising up against their own regime for completely justifiable reasons. So if they're killing people, I think that the African Union should be beginning to say what we get at the end of these prolonged, unending dictatorships is a situation where our own people are confused about Muammar Gaddafi's death. People can't discuss it in a clearer context because it is shrouded now in conspiracy. It is shrouded in the neo-colonial debate, whether or not America is recolonizing Africa. But one of the very forgotten nuances is that, in fact,
he did commit crimes, lots of crimes. Muammar Gaddafi did.
But it's not for America to judge them, is it?
So you know what? If you're going to need help, let the people call you. Let the people seek your help. It's not for you to tell us that we've got a problem.
Well, but people will argue that some people from
there should
Libya,
be consensus.
Libyans, people will argue that the Libyans called for the help. Some people argue that. The only way to get out of that debate is to be able to say the African Union must have values that it stands by.
Exactly.
To such an extent.
Enforce them.
Yes.
Enforce them. And we should make them enforce them. We sit there and just wait and watch and complain. Like no. We should make them.
No, let's support. Look, we have different communities. The Sudanese community right now, the Sudanese people, the Zimbabweans, the people in the DRC as we speak, the people in Cameroon who are tired with their own government, and yet
they're not empowered enough.
Yeah, they're not being empowered. If they try to do anything, they get killed. And then what do you get? You get our own people, our own media, saying that it's the people that were demonstrating. And this is becoming a very loud voice on the continent, where we really find ourselves saying, no, the demonstrators should have been peaceful. Why? Are we talking about peace? Why should that?
We should talk about why they went there in the first place and what is it that they're asking for. Which is the case, I think, with Sudan. With Sudan, I really do. I love that it came from common people organizing themselves, and they had a purpose. The bread tax that you were talking about, that's something that was just suddenly, it was just imposed on the people all of a sudden. And they hadn't had it. They hadn't, that just triggers everything else around. And they've spoken up. The economy is being mismanaged. We shouldn't be in this position. And the people are speaking up. And that's what we should be looking at. Why are they complaining? Why is there an uprising? They've tried dialogue. Dialogue hasn't worked, perhaps. So they'll take to the streets. They'll take to demonstrate. And I think that should be allowed. They have the right to do that.
Yes.
But they should not. For doing that, I don't think they should be tortured. They should not be killed.
Yes. And that should be managed, the management of those crowds should be done using modern techniques and technology that allows people to be managed without violence.
Without abusing police and military resources by the government just because the government manages. And the police should be neutral. They should work to protect.
Absolutely. Now, hold that thought there. This is African Voices. We will get back to the other side and continue our debate on Sudan within the African context and what's happening there. I'm Sibanda, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bailo Jallo. Thank you for watching African Voices on our YouTube channel. You can watch more of our contents by clicking here, and don't forget, you can also subscribe by clicking there. And every Wednesday, we're on Sheffield Live from 8 p.m. till 9 p.m. Thank you.